This podcast may contain disturbing content for some listeners. It's intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised. This is True Crime XS.
This is news from North Country Public Radio.
Federal officials revealed frightening new details yesterday about the activities of the serial killer who took his own life on Sunday in a jail in Anchorage, Alaska. He's blamed for murdering a couple in Essex, Vermont last year. FBI investigators now say Keyes also spent a significant amount of time here in New York's North Country, owning property in Franklin County and disposing of his murder weapons in St. Lawrence County. The FBI says Keyes robbed a bank in Tupper Lake in 2009. He also claimed to have brought one of his victims to the North Country, hiding the body here in the region. Brian Mann has more.
Last spring, FBI agent Jolene Godin began interviewing Israel Keyes in a jail in Anchorage, Alaska. She was trying to solve the murder of one woman, 18-year-old Samantha Koenig, who'd been abducted from a coffee shop in Anchorage in February. Her body later found in a nearby lake. Godin says Keyes began dropping clues that Koenig wasn't his only victim.
That was a process over time with him during the interviews. We've probably met with him close to 30 times over the last 8 or 9 months. He made it pretty clear early on, without directly saying it, that he was responsible for additional homicides.
Godin says Keyes was rarely specific or exact, but he offered enough detail that the FBI was able to begin piecing together the scope of his crimes.
Dropping little hints or little clues, or just the way that he talked about things. And then as we continued to talk with him, he would provide bits of information about where another victim might be, how he chose victims or where he went to look for victims.
This week, the FBI released videotape of Keyes confessing to his method of seeking out victims.
I would let them come to me, just remote area. You might not get exactly what there's not as much to choose from in a manner of speaking, but there's also no witnesses, really. There's nobody else around, so.
As the investigation continued, the FBI called in Vermont officials who were still investigating the disappearance of Bill and Lorraine Currier. The couple vanished from their home in Essex, Vermont in June of last year. Essex Police Lieutenant George Murdy, speaking at a press conference webcast this week by the Burlington Free Press, said he interviewed Keyes for an hour by telephone.
He went through the details of the crime.
What was his demeanor?
Very calm. No display of emotion.
At what point did you actually feel he was the guy responsible?
We had a conversation with the investigators in Alaska. I believe the correct date was April 10th, in which details were released to us in sufficient quantity for me personally to believe that this was the guy.
While speaking with investigators, Keyes also confessed to robbing several banks, including a robbery in Tupper Lake in 2009. FBI agent Jolene Godin says Keyes also claimed to have brought one of his victims here to the North Country, apparently concealing the body here.
It is in northern New York. We don't have anything specific about where that victim is buried. We have kind of general information, but it isn't specific enough that we're able at this point to recover that victim.
Godin says Keyes owned a 10-acre parcel of land in the town of Constable in northern Franklin County. The site was searched in October by FBI investigators based in Albany after local hunters claimed to have seen what looked like grave sites.
A number of items were seized from that location, but there's no indication at this point, based on what Mr. Keyes told us, as well as what was uncovered in the search, that there is a victim buried on that property.
An FBI dive team did find a pair of pistols and a silencer that Keyes admitted to stashing in a reservoir in Parishville in St. Lawrence County, the same weapons used in the murders of the Curriers in Vermont. The probe into Keyes' activities and whereabouts has been underway since his arrest last spring, a fact that was kept secret from the public. FBI officials say Keyes threatened to stop talking if his crimes were revealed to the media. Details were only released this week after Keyes killed himself on Sunday, cutting his wrist with a disposable razor and choking himself with bedding material. The fact that Keyes was allowed to commit suicide while in custody has sparked a separate investigation In an interview with KSKA Public Radio in Anchorage, a spokesman for the Alaska Department of Corrections, Brian Brandenburg, acknowledged that safeguards were supposed to be in place.
In Mr. Key's case, he actually was in segregation. Typically, most high-profile cases, those folks are kept segregated from general population.
Brandenburg says there was no indication that Keys planned to do himself harm. The killer apparently wasn't under the care of psychiatric staff. But FBI agent Jolene Godin acknowledged yesterday that Key's suicide will make it far more difficult for them to uncover details of his murders and the locations of his victims.
Absolutely. I think we still have a lot of work ahead of us, and this case is a little different than other serial killer cases where typically you'd find a number of bodies and victims, and you're trying to connect them back to a person. It's a little different in this case where we have the person and now we're trying to find the victims. So I think we have a lot of work ahead of us.
The FBI is now building a timeline of Key's travels and activities, both here in the North Country and in other parts of the U.S., hoping to discover whether he's connected to other missing person cases. They're also asking the public for any information about his activities. It appears highly unlikely that Keyes was involved in the high-profile disappearance of Colin Gillis, a Tupper Lake man who vanished in March of this year and whose case remains unsolved. According to records of Keyes' travels, the serial killer was in the southwestern U.S. when Gillis went missing. Keyes was actually arrested in Texas 2 days after Gillis was last seen here in the North Country. Brian Mann, North Country Public Radio, Saranac Lake.
Digital distribution of North Country Public Radio news and features is funded by gifts from listeners like you. Join us at ncpr.org.
And just like that, whether we want to be or not, we're headed back to Texas. But now we've got to take a look at a second unexpected trip to Texas. And our focus here is on the timeline and whether or not someone might have been left alive. And right off the bat, there were possibilities.
So then we've got the second trip to Texas. You know, there's the FBI timeline of it. And then he talks about going down south, but then they have him going north. They have his cell phones tracked to show north of where he says he is. I began to suspect that, so he's got these pictures, right? And these pictures are of escorts, of sex trade workers. Rating system and escorts and all of that were like maybes, but also they might be an alibi. I don't even know why, I don't know how that works as an alibi. But what I did find is the official timeline. We know he came into Vegas, right? So he comes into Las Vegas and he drives over and he tells them at his arrest. One of the questions they ask is like, how did you get here? I guess his arrest is this whole thing. But the gist of it is he says that, I wanted my daughter to see the Grand Canyon. And the other thing that's happened is, he's disposed of Samantha Konu's body, and then he's got this double wedding of the two sisters that comes up. So he flies back down one way with the kid, and they drive from Vegas over to the wedding. But what was interesting there is he's stopping along the way, and he's using the ATM card. Because what's happened in the Samantha Koenig case is he disposed of her body, and then he's taken and putting a ransom note up. And the family puts money into the account, and that is a piece of what makes him suddenly trackable.
According to the official FBI timeline, on February the 18th, the killer arrives in Anchorage. It had started to get warmer. On February 21st, he begins evidence disposal, including dismantling the shed in his driveway that has housed the body. On February 22nd, his partner arrives home with a male friend, and the killer begins burning evidence. On February 23rd, the killer describes necrophiling and beginning to dismember the body, and says he lost track of time. Then he goes to buy a Polaroid camera. He makes a ransom photo. The ransom photo involves a very elaborate ruse attempting to give life to the body after 21 days of death. On February 24th, he posts the ransom note. Between February 25th and February 28th, he begins the disposal of the body in Matanuska Lake over 3 days under the guise of ice fishing, and he attends a parent-teacher conference. On February 29th, he attempts to withdraw money from an Alaskan ATM using the debit card of his victim. On March 1st, he succeeds in withdrawing money from the ransom. On March 6th, he flies to Las Vegas and rents a white Ford Focus. On March 7th, he makes an ATM withdrawal in Wilcox, Arizona, and then he attempts to make an ATM withdrawal in Lordsburg, New Mexico, but the transaction fails because it's exceeded the daily limit. On March 8th, he makes an ATM withdrawal in Shepherd, Texas. On March 10th, he makes an ATM withdrawal in Humble, Texas. And on March 11th, he attends a wedding in Nacogdoches, Texas. And on March 13th, he's arrested in Lufkin, Texas.
Well, and they don't know who he is. They don't know that he killed Samantha Koenig. So, and he's left this reference by text, and he's left this ransom note which has the photo. And a lot of people don't know that the photo that is sort of went viral for a little while isn't real. The photo was much more graphic, and I don't have the photo, but I have an accurate description of the photo from one of the thousands and thousands of pages. What they do is they repeat these search warrants over and over again, and what they describe is a very different photo than what's online. She's not sitting up; she's naked and laid out and tied up, and it's a very graphic description. But they missed it in redacting some of the FBI files that were sent over. So I do know that I knew it wasn't real to begin. Well, there's this whole story of how they caught him, and that's sort of where everybody focuses. That's the focus on things. They completely missed the time sensitivity part because they haven't released a lot of the recordings related to his confession of Samantha Koenig and like where the body was, but we know that she was recovered, right? So it becomes this sort of cluster there where people focus on like this unique work that they did identifying the car from the ATM photos, which is awesome in one regard. They sent out the bolos and the pressers, some inaccuracies in there. But what they missed is he had downtime. He had a lot of downtime when he's in Texas. I say that because like he had family around that could watch his kid. And so I started looking. Well, first I started at Texas. I started looking at murders, and like I was looking for like maybe another bank robbery or an arson. And that's where the time sensitivity thing comes in, because I was wondering, like, did he have someone who was sort of at the secondary location, and that's where he was headed back to when they arrested him? Because they arrested him on March 13th, right? Well, when they arrested him on March 13th, which I'm not trying to do a disservice to how they caught him and everything, but I do think they got wrapped up. You know, it's such a good thing that we caught him, and they sort of missed that there might be additional victims. So I started looking, using his travels there on that second trip as a benchmark. And I looked through unsolved murders, I looked through missing persons cases, and I came up with some missing persons candidates for a time-sensitive victim. And those candidates sort of like run down like this. I looked at California, I looked at Texas.
For the killer's second trip to Texas, we took a look at the surrounding states, and we started with California, Utah, Nevada, New Mexico, and Texas, because that's where we knew he had been, or at least was directly contiguous to his lanes of travel. Here's a rundown of a few of the victims that we ruled out, at least as far as them potentially being the time-sensitive victim, and 2 victims that are in his old stomping grounds but seem to be too far away to be possibilities. Bradley Anthony Ayayo was last seen at a desert oasis trailer park on March 3rd, 2012. The circumstances of his disappearance are unknown. He was driving a red 1989 BMW 325i with a California license tag. Bradley was 52 years old, 5 feet 4 inches tall, and weighed between 150 and 180 pounds. He has sandy-colored hair and blue eyes. His case remains unsolved. William Lee Moore was last seen on March 10th, 2012, in Granbury, Texas. He was driving from his home at or around 12 noon, but was not seen after leaving his gated community on videotape. William Moore was 82 years old, 5 feet 10 inches tall, and he weighed 145 pounds. He had gray hair and brown eyes. He wears prescription glasses. His vehicle was missing with him as well, a 1997 Dodge Ram pickup truck that was brown and white, with an extended cab and reflective tape along the tailgate. And sadly, Bill's case has been solved.
From Hood County Today in August of 2018. Finally, a break in the case.
DPS divers recovered a man in his vehicle that was missing from North Richland Hills that was located in the Trinity River at Loop 12 in Dallas, Texas. During the dive, a Dodge pickup was discovered in the water that belonged to William Moore, 83 years old, who was reported missing on 3/10/2012 to the Hood County Sheriff's Office. On August 21st, 2018, DPS divers returned with the necessary equipment and were able to pull the Dodge pickup from the Trinity River. A partial skeleton was discovered in the truck, believed to be William Moore. The remains were sent to the Dallas County Medical Examiner's Office for examination and DNA testing to confirm if the remains are William Moore. The DNA testing could take months before we confirm it is in fact William Moore. Since 2012, Hood County Sheriff's Office investigators, Texas Rangers, and a Hood County Sheriff's Office cold case unit have followed leads and searched multiple locations for Mr. Moore. William Moore's family has been notified of the high probability of the remains being him. Investigators close to the case believe the death appears to be an accidental drowning and ruled out any foul play in the unfortunate death. Quote from Sheriff Roger Deeds: "We are relieved and thankful with the discovery by the DPS dive team and hope it gives the family of William Moore some type of closure in this sad tragedy." Faye Elaine Johnson was last seen in Bethel, Maine on March 7, 2012. She was in the process of moving from a residence on Bates Street in Lewiston, Maine, to an apartment on Vernon Street in Bethel, Maine, at the time of her disappearance. Her vehicle, a green 2004 Subaru Forester, was wrecked before her disappearance and undrivable, but she apparently took the car's vanity license plate, which read SASSYFJ. Johnson apparently left her dog Sassy behind at the Bethel residence, which is uncharacteristic of her. 5 days later, her landlord contacted an animal control officer who removed Sassy from the home. It was only then that Johnson's disappearance was reported to the police. Her cellular phone has been turned off, and there's no money left in her bank account. There were possible sightings of her in the local area after her disappearance. Witnesses said she was acting confused. Although foul play is not suspected in Johnson's case, because of her medical condition, she is considered to be in danger. It's uncharacteristic of her to leave without warning. Faye Elaine Johnson was 62 years old, 5'7" tall, and 150 pounds. She had a medical alert bracelet that says pacemaker. Johnson has several serious medical conditions and is in need of medications, which she doesn't have with her. She has white hair and blue eyes. Johnson has a surgical scar on her left knee. Her case remains unsolved. Colin W. Gillis was last seen in Tupper Lake, New York on March 11, 2012, after he got into an altercation and left a party at a private residence. A passing motorist saw him at 1:45 a.m. walking southbound on State Route 3 near the Franklin Street, Lawrence County line towards the town of Piercefield. He has never been heard from again. His mother reported him missing at 5:30 p.m., and searchers found some of his personal belongings, including his driver's license, near the Franklin-St. Lawrence County line. There was no other sign of him. Gillis is a 2011 graduate of Tupper Lake High School, where he played basketball and football. He was studying pre-med at the State University of New York at Brockport, and was home on spring break at the time of his disappearance. It's uncharacteristic for him to leave without warning, and his family believes he's in danger. His case remains unsolved. Colin Gillis was 18 years old, 6 feet tall. He weighed 170 pounds. He was last seen wearing a men's size medium white short-sleeved American Eagle V-neck t-shirt with black stripes, size 34-32 blue boot-cut Levi's jeans, size 10 red high-top Nike Air sneakers, and an orange LL Bean backpack containing a reversible black and red LL Bean coat. He has blonde hair and blue eyes. Gillis has a scar on his left shoulder blade. His case remains unsolved. Michael Stephen Bickle was last seen in Portage, Indiana on March 9, 2012, when he left on a trip to Lake Michigan. He never returned and has never been heard from again. After his disappearance, his green 2012 Subaru was located and impounded. Bickle left behind 2 notes. One said he was going to swim from Portage Lakefront Park to Navy Pier in Chicago, Illinois, a distance of about 30 miles. He is presumed deceased, and the notes were referenced as suicide notes. He was 54 years old, 5 feet 11 inches tall, 145 pounds. He had graying brown hair, hazel eyes. Bickle's nickname is Mike.
There were definitely some bizarre things going on in the killer's old stomping grounds and places where his family lived, like Indiana, in Maine, and even in Tupper Lake, New York. But as far as we could see, there was no way he could have geographically made it from one place to the other and still be arrested when he was in Texas. We also considered the possibility that the victim might have been found. There were 3 unidentified victims' bodies found that might fit on August 18, 2018, in Kylene, Texas, in an abandoned home. they found the body of a young woman, but she was mummified. Kylene is one of the killer's stomping grounds. This victim has still not been identified. On June 12, 2012, in Jacksboro, Texas, they found the body of a female in an undisclosed location. She's still not been identified. On March 6, 2012, partial remains of a female were found in a cemetery while other people were burying their loved one. But that didn't really fit our timeline. And on March 14, 2012, a woman and her dog were found deceased and decomposing in her residence. We weren't completely sure what to do with that because we didn't think he would necessarily have gone into her residence, but we couldn't rule him out. Postmortem interval was just 2 weeks, and it was right in line with his travels. We kept looking for missing persons cases. Even though we might be able to glean some evidence if these were connected to the killer, we wanted to wrap up missing persons cases first, since those cases directly tied in to our hunt for the bodies. We had one more in Texas that we really wanted to take a hard look at. She was around the time that the killer turned in his rental car because he thought he might have been caught on camera, but he got the exact same rental car. He was rude to a clerk when he turned in his white Ford Focus, so she gave him a white Ford Focus.
Families also searching for answers here tonight. Their loved one disappeared 4 years ago this week, and San Antonio police are actively working the case. News 4 San Antonio's Melissa Vega joins us with how you can help us find Mitzi Jones. Melissa?
Well, Mitzi Jones is 43 years old. She's not originally from San Antonio, but her family says she'd been living here for about a year before she disappeared back in 2012.
This street on the city's east side is the one clue in Mitzi's disappearance. The 2400 block of South New Braunfels is where she was last seen in March of 2012.
Our concern is that we have no new leads.
Obviously, there's somebody out there that knows where your aunt is.
We spoke with Mitzi's niece, Jamie Nelson, via Skype.
We just need to know something.
Jamie says her Aunt Mitzi met a man and was living with him here in San Antonio.
We don't know who that is, but we do know that he has family in the area.
Mitzi had been making plans to visit her parents back in Tyler, but she never made it.
On March 8, 2012, she called my grandfather and said, "Dad, I think I'm going to come home and see you this weekend." And she was never heard from again, and she never used her cell phone again.
Jamie says Mitzi's father is now 80 years old and desperate to know where his daughter is.
He keeps telling me he's running out of time.
Though it's been 4 long years, Mitzi's family is holding on to hope she'll be found.
We all love her. We all miss her.
We really want to help Mitzi and her family find peace.
And Mitzi does have 2 flower tattoos, one on the back of her neck, another from her left hip to her knee, and a star tattoo on her calf. If you have any information, call SAPD's Missing Persons Unit at 207-7660. You don't have to leave your name, and you can call anytime. Melissa Vega, News 4, San Antonio.
This really seemed like our best candidate. We wanted to go back and listen to what the killer said about holding victims or kidnapping victims. And that's a part of an interview that I played the first portion of related to the Post Oak Cemetery that I'm going to play here now.
I also noticed on some of your computers and actually some of the stuff in your vehicle that you had some different movies. Did you get ideas from movies, or is that you just like?
No ideas. Movies still my ideas. Should have got some of them copyrighted. Kind of pissed me off.
You did some of those first.
Yeah. There's some cheap, low budget slasher movie. Some guy made it. I don't know,
been there, done that.
A couple of years ago, and I was kind of pissed off with that one because, as far as I know, nobody had thought of that, or I'd never read about it.
Which movie was that?
I don't remember what it was called. Some stupid
low budget
college kid movie. He was all proud of himself because he was using cable ties and all.
What do you do in the movie?
He strangled this girl with a cable tie. I thought of that right after cable ties were invented. Or at least those big ones.
The thick ones.
Huh?
The big thick ones?
Yeah.
Anything else from the movies?
Movies. Movies are like video games. They're a lot of fun, but they're not like the real thing.
I guess I was curious as to more whether it was the movies that gave you ideas or whether everything and anything you've done has kind of been your own thoughts. And
I can't think of any movies that I got. Well, there was a book I read years and years ago that gave me a lot of ideas, but I can't really blame that because I was already doing stuff when I read that book.
But it gave you ideas.
Yeah.
What book was that?
It's called Intensity by Dean Koontz.
I'm pausing the interview for just a moment to give you a quick description of the antagonist of that book.
From the novel Intensity by Dean Koontz. Edgeler, Foreman, Winston, Vess. Edgeler is a brutal serial killer who preys on men, women, and children according to his mood. He kills for the sheer intensity of it. He believes that life is all about accruing sensation and that he must live with intensity in order to discover new sensations. He meets his match in the protagonist, China, who repeatedly surprises him through the novel. He even admits that she frightens him, as he was not able to sense her twice. Vess tortured and killed animals as a child and committed his first murders at the age of 9 when he burned his parents to death after they caught him torturing a turtle. Their death was considered an accident. 2 years later, he stabbed his grandmother to death because she didn't clean the bathroom to his satisfaction. He was judged to be in need of therapy and was later adopted. He killed his adoptive parents when he was 20, once again by fire, for the insurance money, and started his killing spree 6 years before the novel begins. By this time, he had kidnapped and killed 6 women and had been holding a teenage girl for a year after killing her parents and brother. In the novel, he kills 8 people, making his body count at least 22. Koontz's creation of Vess was inspired by Edmund Kemper, who, as Koontz stated in an interview, killed his grandparents when he was 14 and was released at 21 when psychiatrists said he was no longer a threat to society. He went on to kill 9 more people. At the end of the novel, Intensity, the lead character has escaped from the killer and sees a police car on the road and pulls over to signal it, only to discover that the driver is Vess, the local sheriff.
At one point, this killer had applied to be a police officer, but I was more interested in the kidnapping part. Back to the interview.
And that was the first book I had read that kind of talked about things from the other point of view. Like I read crime novels all the time, but it's always from the detective's point of view. It's never from the bad guy's point of view. And it always pissed me off that I could never find one from the bad guy's point of view. So I read that one. And, yeah.
But you said you used to read crime books. So did you get ideas from that?
No, nothing specific, I don't think. No.
How about from studying Bundy and other people on things that they did that either got them caught or that you thought was a bad idea that you stopped doing or don't do or didn't because of that?
I got lots of those kind of ideas, like what not to do from books and movies and true crime TV. Yeah, there's no shortage of what not to do. If I had been following my own rules. Yeah.
Like, do you know, for Bundy, for instance, do you know enough about him to know where he was doing things and those kind of things? Do you know those details on him?
Yeah, I know. I know serial killers all the way back to my other serial killer hero, I guess, not really even relevant because he was so long ago, was H.H. Holmes. He was pretty much a genius, but back in his day it was pretty easy to be a genius because nobody really expected stuff like that back then. So got away with it for a long time.
And no technology really to have to outsmart.
Right. Back then, you could hire other people to build dungeons for you, and nobody would even think twice about it. It's like, oh, that guy wants a dungeon. Well, anything I build like that nowadays, I kind of have to do myself. I don't know.
That kind of warrants an obvious follow-up question of, do you have a dungeon? Have you ever built anything like that?
No, nothing that elaborate.
Something you would have liked to have, though.
Oh, I had plenty of plans for him. It's not really... It's more my retirement plan.
Your stuff seems to be, the stuff that we know about, seems to be kind of quick in the sense that it happens over a day period of time or 12-hour period of time or something like that. And again, we told you we weren't going to get into like push you for specifics on a lot of this, on this kind of stuff, but were there crimes where you did keep someone for longer than that?
No. A few hours.
Plans to and didn't work out, or just you purposefully kept it short like that for logistics reasons and not getting caught?
Yeah, I had plans to, it would have been nice if I could have done that, but I was never set up to do it to where it would have been pretty high risk if I'd ever tried to do that.
You joked about the retirement plan. Was that something you had thought about? Trying to figure out a way to do that, though? Logistically, a way to be able to do that?
Yeah. It's a lot easier to do it if you're a bachelor. So it would have been a few years before I started construction.
And it was here that we realized, Meg and I, that maybe the police were asking the wrong question. So I'm going to go back to that time-sensitive clip, which took place several months before this conversation. Because while they ask him if he'd ever kept anyone, his answers are a little shaky. And what we were wondering was, had he been caught while he was in the middle of it? And I apologize for the quality of the clip, but this is one of the first interviews with this killer. No one had any idea who he was, just that he'd killed Samantha Koenig and had told him where the body was.
This is Special Agent Steve Payne with the FBI. Today is Thursday, April 5th. The time is approximately 1:55 p.m. by my watch. Following will be an interview with Israel Keys, date of birth January 7th, 1978, at the Anchorage jail. Also present is Detective Mickey Dahl with the Anchorage Police Department.
They don't let us memorize it, actually. What's the fun of that, right? I guess this way it's not open to interpretation. Assume you don't want to hear it in Spanish. So, you have the right to remain silent. Do you understand?
Yep.
Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Do you understand this right?
Yep.
You have the right to talk to a lawyer and have him present with you while you're being questioned. Do you understand this right?
Yes.
If you cannot afford to hire a lawyer, will be appointed to represent you before any question if you wish. Do you understand this right?
Yes.
You can decide at any time not to exercise these rights and not answer any questions or make any statements. Do you understand this right?
Yep.
Okay. Having the rights in mind, you understand that we're not here to talk to you about anything concerning the Samantha Koenig case, that you're represented by Mr. Kertner on that case, and we're here to talk to you about some other things that are going on. Is that okay?
Yep.
Okay. It occurred to me the other day that after I left, that there were two things that I had kind of left out. First of all, I didn't give you any contact information or any way to contact me. And the second thing is I just didn't make it very clear that while you are represented by Mr. Kertner on the Samantha Koenig case, you are completely in control about these other cases. And you mentioned at the time that you had some demands and that they were reasonable demands. And I wanted to see if you would tell me about those so I can start trying to take care of those for you.
Well, as of now, there aren't any other cases, at least not that anyone's talked to me about. So, talking about them that's kind of putting the horse before the cart, or the cart before the horse, or something like that.
Okay. Were the demands that you were talking about then, was that specific?
That's mostly things I need to talk to the prosecutor about.
Okay.
And it's related to the Koenig case.
Okay, so you would need to have your attorney talk to your attorney about them.
I don't know. I can't seem to fire him, so I guess I need to have him around.
All right, well, I can't comment on that specifically, but like I said, earlier this week, you just mentioned that you have very specific demands and that they were reasonable demands, and I was wanting to make sure that I hadn't misunderstood you and wanted to know if there were more demands that you had. I think you've seen that we've kind of kept our word with respect to the media, and I know that you stated that you needed some time for the other things. So just like I said, I wanted to kind of touch bases with you, give you my contact information because, frankly, I forgot about it.
Well, from what I hear, I won't even be in court for another couple of weeks or something. So.
For your indictment.
Yeah.
Right. And I can't, like I said, I really just can't discuss anything about
Right.
Koenig. But with regard to everything else, anything else you might want to talk to me about, you are in control of that. And I'm kind of at your beck and call.
All right.
So I'll give you my contact information. I give you my business card, but that's probably not something you want to be carrying around with you in here. So, would you prefer just kind of written on a piece of note paper, or would you like my business
That's fine. I probably won't be calling. I'm probably going to have to talk to the prosecutor.
Okay.
Or somebody, I don't know, higher up for what I need to talk to him about.
Do you want me then to try and arrange with the U.S. attorney and your attorney a meeting? Is that what or do you want to speak to your attorney about that?
Well, no, that would be fine. That's fine. If the U.S. attorney is open to that, or if he's interested in that, then as far as I'm concerned, the sooner we work it out. Like, I can't say too much about it.
Sure, no.
My attorney's not going to go along with it. So,
okay. Well, I'll tell the U.S. attorney then. I'll go back.
Just have him give him a call.
I'll tell the U.S. attorney to get a hold of your attorney. And then,
I've already made it clear that that's what I want, but
okay.
The worst case scenario is going to have to wait until.
No, and that's okay. And I didn't come here to crush you at all, sir.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, we just came here because you had indicated that there were other conversations, other stories that you.
Well, like I say, I have no doubt they'll come up eventually. That's up to. I can't really. I'm not really,
pressure. I'm not trying to pressure anybody, but yeah, it is kind of an unusual situation because some of the things might be time sensitive. So, I mean, if it takes a couple weeks for me to get into court or whatever to get the stuff moving, so be it. But, you know.
And that's kind of the impression that we had talking to you, is that there might be some time sensitivity to this, and so that was part of why we wanted to.
There is, but, you know, there's nothing I can do about it. I mean, I'm not going to say anything about any of that stuff until I know what's going on with this case. Sure. So, in this case, you know, slow down, so.
Okay, and that's fine. That's something that I guess maybe we weren't clear on.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Well, I'll if you don't mind, it's not very professional, but do you mind if I just kind of jot my name and my phone number down on a piece of paper?
No, that's
or
fine.
Okay.
That's fine.
I really don't do this very often.
I don't get jail or numbers in jail very often.
There's my name and my cell phone number.
Alrighty.
Alright, and I guess that's it. Like I said, I'm sorry that I forgot about it the other day. As soon as I walked out the front door, I was like, oh man.
No, it's no biggie. Like you say, there's not much. Justice system moves the way it moves.
It grinds slowly, right? It grinds slowly. All right. I think that's the way this works.
Yeah. They'll let me know eventually.
It is incredibly warm in here. Wow.
You got a fleece jacket on.
Yeah. It's overdressed, I guess.
Or down or something.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's down. Is that the kind with the feathers?
Yeah.
I only know that because a feather comes out every once in a while. When did they change from pink to purple?
I don't know. Purple since I got here.
Yeah. Oh, well, it could be. I guess purple is better than pink.
Yeah, it's Vikings color.
Right, there you go. That's like,
See.
That concludes the interview with Israel Keys.
I'm playing the clip in its entirety so you can hear how creepy it is to hear a confessed rapist, kidnapper, and murderer talk to this particular detective. We started to wonder if all of this was just a tactic to get attention or privileges or something. It almost seemed like the investigator there, not the woman that he almost seems to be flirting with, but the FBI agent, Steve Payne, has the same impression that Meg got. And that's the whole interview. And a lot of people don't pay very much attention to that interview at all. In fact, with the released information, the FBI never mentions that again. And at this point, we've laid out all the known possibilities. So we had to look at a few things that are really weird, including a case that nearly mimics the Samantha Koenig abduction.
More police need help finding a missing motel clerk who's also wanted for sex crimes. News 9's Ivana Johnson has the latest.
Police tell me as soon as they find Anthony Lennon, they'll arrest him. The question more police have for him deal directly with child pornography and money that went missing from the hotel register. Yet they aren't calling the 30-year-old a suspect. The owners of Super 8 Motel and more say the Anthony Lennon they know is a responsible clerk who worked the overnight shift for a year. Lennon's bosses didn't know he had a rap sheet, but Friday he went missing and his register was empty.
It's one of two things. Either he's a suspect or he's a victim, and we don't know until we find him. That's basically what it all hinges on. He's the only witness that we have, and we haven't been able to locate him yet.
Hotel management wouldn't talk on camera, but they told police Lennon seemed trustworthy.
He was one of our local sex offenders that's registered, but as far as problems, I don't know of any other than we do have a warrant for his arrest.
The $100,000 warrant is for child pornography, an incident that happened in November, according to court documents. Now, the Metro Task Force is looking for Lennon.
Their whole job is to locate people. They can focus all their effort on that to where, our detectives have to work a lot of different things and a lot of different angles to where they can just focus on finding the person.
Still more police say they can use all the help they can get. So if you have any information on Lennon's whereabouts, you're asked to call more police. Their number, 793-5171. Reporting from the website.
All right, Ivana, police say the task force can normally locate a suspect within 2 or
your
3
thoughts
days.
on Lennon on tape, and that's the guy. That's the clerk.
I've sort of gone back and forth on him. It's a few strange sets of circumstances. Unfortunately, I have, looked, and I actually found somebody stating that there were no surveillance cameras and there were no witnesses. That makes it really hard because at this point, we're talking March 8th or 9th. What happens to Anthony Lennon, what happens to him could essentially be exactly what happened to Samantha Koenig without the video surveillance, because he was not at work when, somebody came in and money was gone and there was a little bit of a disarray, and then they found blood. Now, I don't think there was no blood at the coffee stand where Samantha Koenig was. The door wasn't locked, or there was some other telltale sign that there was an issue. And plus, she didn't show up home. But so that being said, very well could be keys. Because he would have essentially just been doing the exact same thing that he had already done. But there are other underlying circumstances that Anthony Lennon was experiencing that he had a few reasons to run away. And there was a very, he was facing a probation revocation, and he had a pretty long sentence hanging over his head. I'm just not sure. I just can't really make a determination on that. It's awfully coincidental.
We checked into the Metro Task Force, and they've got a really good clearance record for who they find. And they use all their local, state, and federal resources. So it was suspicious to us that we couldn't find anything related to Anthony Lennon. And they didn't either. He was definitely the type of fugitive that the task force was accustomed to hunting down, and the type of defendant they made sure found their way to court. So for him to still be missing 8 years later is suspect. I wanted to see if I could find any more criminal activity in the same vicinity as Anthony Lennon. I sort of did. I actually found a missing persons case that was reported at one time, reflecting another time, whose social media posts and communications ends around the same time we were looking at for the second trip to Texas. And she went missing from just an hour north of Anthony. Meg wasn't sure if we should include this, but I'm going to, because her case deserves spotlighting. She was a mother who suddenly vanished and left children behind, who were already in the care of family members. But something about her case just bothered me.
Shannon Michelle Baldwin Hokanson was last seen in the spring of 2012. She never contacted her loved ones again, which is uncharacteristic of her. She usually called family or family friends once a week. She wasn't reported missing until August 7th, months after her disappearance. Hokanson does have a history of drug use, and drugs could be a factor in her disappearance. She left behind 3 children. Few details are available in her case. She was 29 years old, between 5 foot and 5 foot 3 inches tall, and between 120 and 150 pounds. She has brown hair and brown eyes, with numerous tattoos, including a frog with a mushroom on the outside of her ankle, blue roses on her lower back, an orange flower on the top of her left foot, a butterfly on the back of her right shoulder, a heart between her thumb and index finger, and unfinished flames running down her spine. She may use the last names Baldwin Hokanson, and some accounts refer to her by either of those names and different combinations. She went missing in Enid, Oklahoma, but she's from Fort Wayne, Indiana.
And shortly after the arrest on March 13th in Lufkin, Texas, there was another strange incident.
A helicopter joined the search for a missing Tupper Lake man that continued well into the night. State police searched a house in Conifer with flashlights and guns in hand. A neighbor says the homeowners haven't been around for months, so when he saw lights on and doors open, he called police. A passerby had found Angela Roberts about a mile or so away from the home earlier in the night. She was alive and walking, say police, but injured. Officials didn't elaborate but say she had to be taken to a hospital. Carl Burns Jr. and Roberts had been reported missing Wednesday morning. That ups Tupper Lake's missing person count to 3 in less than a 2-week period. 18-year-old Colin Gillis of Tupper Lake went missing March 11th in Piercefield. Police say there's no evidence at this time to connect Burns and Roberts' disappearances with Gillis's.
You're hearing what people are talking about in town as far as guns and people missing, and do you keep your kids inside? Do you go out of town for the day?
All the police activity in the area is putting residents on edge. People say they just want things to go back to normal.
Have it, obviously just go away and, have them found and get the answers and, back to the normal, quiet life that we're used to.
In Tupper Lake, Lauren Victory, News Channel 5.
And aside from this being part of the killer's weird second trip to Texas and his arrest, and knowing his stomping grounds were up in that area, at least where he confessed to a bank robbery, I don't have any evidence that it's all connected either. But I did start to think, did the coverage of Tupper Lake in the national news potentially influence how the killer was telling his story to the FBI? It was something that Meg didn't agree with me on. I had to report it here because it happened. And this is all a part of the search for the bodies of the victims and potential victims of this killer. Do any of these things mean there was a potentially time-sensitive victim? We're not sure yet. And we won't really know until this is all over. Next week, we start looking at the chronology of the killer's time after the military and potential victims he might have left in his wake, their locations, and what they might have in common. I'm also going to share with you the rest of the victim types so that we can start to look at them together. Thanks for joining us. You can reach us at 252-365-5593 or at truecrimexcess.com or truecrimexcess@gmail.com if you want to send us a note. This episode was brought to you by LabrottieCreations.com. That's LABROTTIECREATIONS.com. Check out the merchandise and specifically their fun Pop Pet art custom pieces made from photos of your very own pets. Use the promo code CRIMEXS, that's CRIMEXS, for 20% off a fun, brightly colored, happy piece of art of your own pet at their site, LabrottieCreations.com. Music in this episode was licensed for True Crime XS. The theme song was Indestructible by Noah Smith. Thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe if you want to hear more. You can come over to Patreon.com and check out what we've got going on there if you'd like to donate to fund future True Crime XS road trip investigations and FOIA requests. We'd also like to thank Anchor and Spotify for having the coolest all-in-one podcast platforms available. Definitely download the Anchor app or go to Anchor.fm to start your own show today.
This is True Crime XS.
A Study in Scarlet is an 1887 detective novel by Scottish author Arthur Conan Doyle. The story marks the first appearance of Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, who would become the most famous detective duo in popular fiction. The book's title derives from a speech given by Holmes, a consulting detective to his friend and chronicler, Watson, on the nature of his work, in which he describes the story's murder investigation as his study in scarlet. it. There's the scarlet thread of murder running through the colorless skein of life, and our duty is to unravel it and isolate it and expose every inch of it. The story and its main characters attracted little public interest when it first appeared. Only 11 complete copies of the magazine in which the story first appeared, the Beaton's Christmas Annual, for 1887 are known to exist now, and they have considerable value. Although Conan Doyle wrote 56 short stories featuring Holmes, A Study in Scarlet is one of only 4 full-length novels in the original canon. The novel was followed by The Sign of the Four, published in 1890. A Study in Scarlet was the first work of detective fiction to incorporate the magnifying glass as an investigative tool.